This is Eyewitness News Up Close with Bill Ritter.
President Trump wasting no time taking out his pen and signing a slew of executive orders and reversing many of the orders he didn't like that were signed by former President Biden. And in a most controversial move, pardoning Trump supporters convicted in the January 6th Capitol Hill riots and giving clemency to those convicted of the most serious and violent crimes. So what does Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York think of these executive orders? He's our first guest this morning. And we also dig deep into President Trump cracking down on undocumented immigrants and sending more troops to the southern border. This morning, we talked to Democratic Congressman from New York, Espaillat, who came to the United States as an undocumented immigrant when he was a child. Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Up Close. I'm Bill Ritter. It has been quite a first week in office for the 47th President of the United States. Donald Trump using his executive powers and actions to follow through on what he promised he would do during his campaign. Right now, with Republicans in control of the House and of the Senate, and Mr. Trump appears to be in an uber-strong position. But the majority party is filled with people who don't have the exact same politics all the time. Some members of Congress are not so much in a red or blue situation for the state they're in. Instead, some are in a purple section. One of them, Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York, and he joins us this morning. Congressman, good morning. Thanks for joining us on Up Close.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
Good to talk to you and see you again. You met this last week along with some other moderate Republicans, a handful of them, three of them actually, this past week with President Trump. So what did you talk about and what was that like?
I'm not going to get into the details of the conversation, but I will tell you the president was in good spirits and certainly wants to work with all of us, inclusive of members like me who are in districts Kamala Harris won. And the objective, obviously, is to address the challenges facing the American people, from the affordability crisis to the border crisis to the international crises around the globe. And I think, obviously, this week we saw the president take significant action by executive order to address the border crisis and, especially start the process of deporting criminal aliens out of the United States. And I think that is something that he not only ran on, but won on. I think Americans across the country were tired of what was going on under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, 10.5 million migrants flooding into the United States, crippling cities like New York, a sanctuary city, costing the state billions of dollars of taxpayer money on free housing, clothing, food, education, and health care. And they wanted President Trump to act, and that's what he has started to do.
You are known as someone who wants to have some sort of, across the aisle action. You know a lot of people who are Democrats, and you brag about working with them, and you have worked with them. We know that. You've been on this show with a Democrat who you're close to. When you talk about Mr. Trump, and you don't want to talk about exactly what you talked about, what did you take from all this? What's your overall view of this?
Look, the president wants to address the challenges most acutely facing Americans. And he's a New Yorker at heart. We certainly talked about New York and the issues impacting New York. He's been very clear, for instance, that he agrees with me about lifting the cap on salt. And that we need to get that done. We met with him down at Mar-a-Lago just about 2 weeks ago and spoke about that very subject. And certainly, that is a topic of conversation as we move forward. So, look, I think the president wants to work with those who are willing to work with him. My hope among my Democratic colleagues is that this is not the resistance 2.0, but rather find area of commonality, find area of agreement, where to work with the president, where you must object or oppose. So be it. That's politics. But I think the objective for all of us should be to address the challenges most acutely impacting the American people and New Yorkers, from the affordability crisis to the border crisis.
All right, good.
And I will just tell you, Bill, one of the things, in addition to salt, that has come up in conversation with the president has been the issue of congestion pricing.
Right.
And he agrees with me that we need to kill it.
Well, let's talk about all those things. Let's talk about salt first, because you started that, and we'll make that the shortest version. It was Mr. Trump who killed this. He killed it, especially in blue states, states where you work and you represent now. This was a very big blow economically to most people. You don't have to be a billionaire. In fact, billionaires don't care about this. People who are upper class, middle class, and just trying to get things going in their lives, this was a very big deal financially.
There's no question that the cap on salt as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act had a negative impact on New York, in large part, Bill, because of the disastrous leadership and policies in New York. We lead the nation in outmigration. We have the highest tax burden, the highest cost of living. It's the worst business climate. So people leave this state in droves, and the cap on salt obviously had an impact on that. President Trump understands that, and he, as a New Yorker, is most acutely aware of it and wants to address it. That's why he said during the campaign that he would work to lift the cap on salt. That's why he's reiterated it in conversation with me and my colleagues.
Because you put pressure on. You put pressure.
We will get this done in this Congress as part of the tax bill negotiation. I've been very clear about that. I will not support a tax bill that does not lift the cap on salt. Okay. I have introduced legislation to lift it to $100,000 for individuals, $200,000 for married couples filing jointly. So we will get this done. It's going to be a negotiation. You got to get 218 votes in the House and 51 votes in the Senate. But we will get it done in this Congress. President Trump has committed to that in our discussions, and I really am heartened by that because it obviously has an impact on New York.
Those cheers you hear are Democrats and Republicans who took a big bite from their economic from the checkbook, and they appreciate that. Let's talk about congestion pricing. There's a big move, Republicans and Democrats, outside of New York City, to try to stop this and make it a legal battle. So far, it hasn't worked.
Look, in my conversations with the administration, we have talked about the fact that the Federal Highway Administration is the one that greenlit this under the Biden administration for New York. But they did not do a full environmental review. You've already had a federal judge weigh in on that and say that the decision to greenlight this was arbitrary and capricious. Those court cases are still proceeding forward. But I do believe that the Federal Highway Administration has the authority to revoke these approvals that were issued by the Biden administration and kill congestion pricing. And my view is they should do that. And if Kathy Hochul feels so strongly about it, then go ahead and sue. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that this program is a scam. It is a money grab. It was all about raising $1 billion so that they could borrow $15 billion more. But here's the scary part, Bill. The MTA carries more debt than 80% of the states in the country. Let me repeat that. The MTA carries more debt than 80% of the states in the country. It is the worst run authority in America, bar none. And it needs a complete overhaul.
They would say to counter that, if they were in the room right now, that, hey, we have the biggest transportation system in the country. And it is, the train I take every day.
But to carry debt greater than 80% of the states, that's insane.
I'm not justifying what they do economically. I'm just saying that they run the biggest and they don't always get funded for it. And the trains I take are 100 years old, that system. So that's also a problem. And for
there's no question the infrastructure needs upgrades. But remember, under the bipartisan infrastructure bill, New York got $100 billion for infrastructure. Where's the money? What are they doing with it? There's a lot that can be done to support the MTA. When you look at how the state spends money, the governor just proposed a $252 billion budget. You're telling me you couldn't find $1 billion for the MTA? Yep. Meanwhile, you're spending billions of dollars on illegal immigrants to provide free housing, clothing, food, education, and healthcare? Yep. It's crazy, Bill. And this is why the mismanagement of our state has forced so many New Yorkers to move elsewhere.
Let's talk about something that happened and is happening right now. It's got a lot of people in your district and in all of New York very, very worried. Several stories we've done this past week about undocumented workers. There are many undocumented workers who have been here for years, who work very hard, who work in your district, doing all sorts of things, and certainly are big factors in the economic well-being of New York City. 400,000 workers They don't have papers. There have been, people who come in, ICE members, federal officers coming in and trying to get people out of this country. It happened on Thursday in Newark, New Jersey, right across the river here. And there were people who were taken who didn't have IDs, and they were American citizens. One was a military veteran. Have we gone too far here?
Look, there's always going to be an instance where somebody is either misidentified, and that obviously should be rectified immediately. But the fact is that we have allowed a situation in this country that is unsustainable. 10.5 million migrants have flooded into the United States under catch and release that was put in place by the Biden administration. Most of these asylum cases, when they are finally heard after 2 to 3 years, they are rejected. 70%, in fact, are rejected. So we have a broken system that is not working. You have criminal aliens that are being arrested and detained and are going to be deported, and they should be. If you are committing acts of violence here in the United States and you are here illegally, you should be removed from the United States, period. There is no question, Bill, that we have people who have been in this country for a very long time. They are undocumented. Part of the reason why I supported the Dignity Act is because I do believe we need to address this system. I think you need a pathway to legalization, not necessarily citizenship, but to get people out of the shadows, people who are contributing to our economy, people who have been here a long time, who have children or grandchildren that may be citizens. The objective should be to end this broken system once and for all, secure the border, fix the asylum and parole process, deport criminal aliens, get those that are in the shadows out of the shadow, start working towards paying back taxes, a fine, anything that would address their situation specifically, and then fix the legal immigration system so that we have a more merit-based system to address the economic needs of this country. That should be the objective and the goal as we work through this.
Mike, with all due respect, we have about 15 seconds left. Just a quick answer. You like bipartisanship. You want bipartisanship. There's still a lot of vitriol out there. Are you pleased the way this is going so far with Mr. Trump?
Look, I think the president obviously has come in and he is acting on the agenda that he outlined when he ran for president. There's going to be division in our country. There's no question about that. Our politics are coarse and people disagree on a lot of critical issues. Okay. But we have a responsibility as elected officials to move forward on the issues that most acutely impact our country. And that's what my job is. I will continue to work in a bipartisan way to address the issues facing the country and find an area of commonality where we can and treat people with dignity and decency. That is my objective and my goal and how I comport myself at all times.
Congressman Mike Lawler, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. The world, certainly the country, is looking at you, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Bill.
We're going to dig deeper now into the Trump crackdown on undocumented immigrants. Hundreds of people rounded up in the first few days alone. And the Trump administration says places like schools and churches are no longer off limits to federal ICE agents. These moves, as you might imagine, sparking rather huge fears among undocumented workers and a lot of other people, including some 400,000 in New York City right now. Joining us this morning, Democratic Congressman Espaillat of New York. He knows a thing or 20 about this issue because you, sir, were an undocumented kid when you came into the U.S. from the Dominican Republic as a child. You are the first undocumented person in the U.S. to later be elected to Congress. Good to see you.
Same here.
Good to see you. And Happy New Year. And I hope the rest is good, too, because it's. I know you're going to have a strong sentiment about what we're seeing in the streets of New York, of New Jersey, in other states around the country right now.
Absolutely, Bill. And let me just start by saying there has been misinformation, a misinformation campaign about what a sanctuary city really is. It's not a city that harbors violent criminals or protects them or cuddles them. There are over 100 laws in the books right now in the penal code that would allow for somebody that commits any of those crimes, mainly violent crimes, to be arrested, convicted, and deported. But what a sanctuary city does, it allows a mom to take her kid to school without the fear that the principal is going to call ICE on her, or a senior to go into an emergency room and not fear that the nurse is going to turn them in.
It's not giving sanctuary to criminals.
No, absolutely
not. Giving
not.
Sanctuary.
It's a safety net. It's a safety net for the most vulnerable. It's for a woman to be able to go into a precinct if she's a victim of domestic violence and not be, cuffed, arrested, and deported if she has no papers.
So over this past week, we have done many stories about people who are fearful of this, and now we see why, because people have been hauled around and brought up by ICE agents, which are federal agents, and they have taken them away. The other night in Newark, you saw this. All of a sudden, people were being handcuffed and moved out of a building because why? Because they didn't have any information on them to say, I'm a citizen. There were citizens of the United States that were there that were busted. There was a veteran of the United States.
That's correct.
Who was busted. You came as a kid, an undocumented worker. Your parents were undocumented workers, and you came to get into this life. You did pretty well for yourself. First congressman to be elected who was once an undocumented worker. What is your feeling when you see all this?
Horrible, right across the river. It could be New York City as well.
It is.
So what's the criteria, right, that's being used to determine who gets stopped? Is it a profiling? You may not look American. America is very diverse now. They're from all walks of life, from all continents of the world. So is it that? And then, of course, we see how citizens are getting stopped. I always said that a massive deportation plan would be messy, if not inhumane. Unfortunately, I think we're going to see even nastier things happen than just getting a citizen stopped and arrested or a veteran, someone that served our country.
The fear among many people watching this was, hey, this is not just about people who have done crimes. And in fact, these people were not doing any crimes.
It sends out a chilling effect that impacts not just the undocumented who are very afraid, but even, as you said, citizens and people that may have their green cards that are here legally will be very afraid that they're going to get stopped, cuffed, arrested, and deported. And so this is troubling that there's no infrastructure to conduct this massive deportation scheme, right? So this is going to be really messy and inhumane.
What's your reaction to what a federal judge in Seattle did this last week and say, hey, we're putting a temporary restraining order on Donald Trump's position on this, and we're going to stop this while we decide all this?
Well, I think that's good. I think we got to think through this. This is not off the cuff. This should not be something that just is a rapid response. We got to really think through this. There's a lot of things on the table, including potentially doing away with birthright citizenship that should be thought through. And I think that that's the right decision of a judge to do that. I think many judges, there are 20 states that now have challenged some of the executive orders, and I think many of the judges will act in the same direction.
I got a million things to ask you. We got 2.5 minutes left because it goes quickly with you. Quickly, your reaction to Donald Trump, pardoning members of the January 6th insurrection. What is your reaction to that, especially vis-a-vis what's happening right here?
Horrible. I speak to Sergeant Gunnell, who is a New Yorker, a Brooklynite, often. He's in D.C. He was one of the police officers, the Capitol police officers that were beat up by felons, people that were convicted, very violent people. Some of them were predicate felons. And now they're released. They're released into our communities. I predict that they're going to commit additional crimes as we move forward. So we'll be watchful of that. But it's horrible that law enforcement, that our police officers, the Capitol Police and the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police officers, that not only stood up for democracy and safeguarded democracy, but that protected our lives. Both Democrats and Republicans now have to see that, in fact, these folks are being released to the communities across America. Horrible president.
Let me talk to you a little bit about what's happening locally. We'll talk about Mayor Adams. He went to the inauguration of President Trump. You did not go. You were here in your house.
I was in the city, yes.
Okay. It was also Martin Luther King Day, so a lot of people did not go there. When he came back, when the mayor came back and was asked about what's happening here with these new laws by these new moves by the president, he said. And he defended New Yorkers. New Yorkers are not going to put up with this. We're not going to help do this. We shouldn't be helping do this, and we don't want to, because these people are part of our fabric, unless they've done a crime. How did you feel about that? Because a lot of people gave him a lot of poop for going to that inauguration.
Well, first, I stayed here. I started the day with Catholic Charities and, of course, a group of immigrants, giving them a card, a pocket card that's Know Your Rights, so that they're in power and they can go out on the street and know exactly the do's and don'ts of this, this whole issue. That's important that they know that. And then, of course, it was Martin Luther King Day, so I was in Harlem for most of the day.
Your reaction to the mayor?
Well, I didn't go. He did. He made his choice. I'm glad that he's not. He said that the New York City Police Department, the finest, are going to be out there chasing bad guys in New York City and not necessarily being federal agents enforcing immigration law or trying to do massive deportation. I think we got lots to do here for public safety. The federal government should do what they need to do.
This is not going away. We'd like to have you come again and give your insight on
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll come back anytime.
Congressman Adriano Espaillat.
Thank you.
Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year. When we come back, we talk to our political team about President Trump's first week in his second term. What's he done well, and maybe what's he done not so well? Let's get right to our political team. ABC News political director and Washington, D.C. bureau chief Rick Klein and political consultant Hank Shyakoff. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us once again. I want to get your opinions about what struck you the most in Mr. Trump's first week in office.
The biggest takeaway to me is that he said he would do things, and if you didn't believe him, then all you had to do was watch. And you put at the top of that list January 6th and his decision to do a far more sweeping pardon and series of commutations for people involved in the heinous terrorist type attacks on the Capitol, the attempts to overthrow the election. All of that essentially wiped away, and the images of some of those people showing up at the Capitol under much different circumstances speaks as loudly as you can. Couple that with the moves on immigration, on diversity, equity, inclusion. And from the Trump perspective, it is promises made, promises kept. From the opposition party's perspective, it's, oh my gosh, what are we even looking at?
January the 6th, Hank, is he going to come to rue that day?
He will rue that day because ultimately, if he makes real serious errors along the way, people who support police in this country will be very upset. Why? 6 police officers died as a function of what occurred on that day. Others were severely injured. I mean, it's an attack on the very people that Trump needs the most.
Let's talk about another thing he's done big time, and it's causing worries in big cities around the country. Here in New York and in Newark this last week, federal ICE agents came and took people away. There were U.S. citizens who just didn't have an ID with them, and even one of them was a veteran. People are scared. Rick?
Yeah, the swiftness with which some of these operations are carried out, the use of the military and military equipment for the first time in border operations like this, far from the border, of course, people that came here as under undocumented immigrant circumstances, breaking the law, are being rounded up, and this is going to continue and I think escalate. Yeah. And I think the goal of Trump is twofold. One is to deliver on this big campaign promise that he made to deport undocumented immigrants, and second is the show of force, and to show for his supporters in the rest of the country that there's a different message out there, and show to the rest of the world, people that might come here, that you're not going to be welcomed here. That is a paradigm shift that he's looking to put into action.
Hank?
He's also telling his enemies that you'd better watch out because he's going to use whatever force he has against you. The release of the January 6th defendants with the kinds of pardons they got is as if he's asking to create an almost parallel military operation should he need them to remain in power. This is very dangerous, very dangerous situation.
All right, we got about 45 seconds left. I want to get your take on this. He gave an interview to Fox News, Sean Hannity, and Sean Hannity says to him, hey, let's talk about the economy and where it's going. And he goes, no, I don't want to talk about it. It's doing very well. And I thought, wait a minute. I look at that, look at my notes. Didn't didn't his campaign trash the economy, how it was going?
He definitely did, and the lack of immediate focus on the economy is jarring as well, given how central that was to why a lot of people voted for him. I think he's going to be judged like other presidents, maybe get too much credit for a good economy and too much blame for a bad one. But I know that there is focus on it, but it certainly hasn't grabbed the initial headlines. This has not been about getting the economy moving in the first couple of days of the Trump administration.
All right, Hank, you got the final word on this.
Sure, his attempt to criticize the press and put some of them out of business and threaten people is a way to ensure that this kind of information and the reality of the moment and the past moment is never said in public.
All right, gentlemen, as always, thanks for your insight. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back. And that's going to do it for this edition of Up Close. Tiempo with Joe Torres is next. If you missed any of today's programs, I'll be posting today's segments on my Facebook page tomorrow. And, of course, you can always watch the show on our podcast on any of our ABC7 New York platforms. Thank you all for watching. I'm Bill Ritter, and for all of us here at Channel 7 Eyewitness News, we wish you health and peace. And let's take care of each other.